Unfortunately, guys, that session we recorded the other day that was over an hour did not save. So here I am trying to re-record the gist of it. Obviously, I won't be able to duplicate it exactly, but I'm going to do the best I can to cover all of the sections that I went over in the last video. Again, I'm so sorry. That was a really good session, and it was over an hour long. I'm not sure what I did or didn't do right, but the video did not save. So I'm looking at section 7D in your homework, which is multiplying polynomials. Here you can see that you have two terms being multiplied by two terms. We call expressions that have two terms binomials. Bi meaning two, like a bicycle has two wheels. So really what you have here is two terms being multiplied by two terms. So what we're going to use is a method called FOIL. I honestly don't like to refer to that method. I actually just like to use arrows to indicate that each term has been multiplied to both terms. So for instance, 3x gets multiplied by 2x, and you get 6x squared. And then you make sure 3x also gets multiplied by the 3, which gives me a plus 9x. So what we've done here is we've taken the first term in this first set of parentheses, and we've made sure that it got multiplied by both terms in the second set. And you want to make sure you do the same thing with the second number. So the second number is negative 5. I want to go negative 5 times 2x is a negative 10x, and negative 5 times 3, which is a negative 15. Now, notice I have four terms, right, because I multiplied four different numbers. Now I want to combine like terms as much as possible, which I see here 9x and negative 10x are like terms because they both have the x variable with the same exact exponent that happens to be 1. That means that we can actually combine the coefficients, which in this case are 9 and negative 10, which is negative 1. So my final answer here is going to be 6x squared minus 1x minus 15. This can also just be written as 6x squared minus x minus 15. These are totally equivalent. They mean the same exact thing. So here when you go to type in your answer, you're only typing in the coefficients, which is 6, a negative 1, and minus 15 is the constant. I'm just going to skip around and, strategically pick a couple problems that I want to make sure we cover. In this expression here, don't be thrown off by the fact that you only see one set of parentheses, okay? Because that set of parentheses is being squared by that exponent. So what that really means is I am going to write whatever is in that set of parentheses twice. And once you write it twice, it should look pretty familiar to the problem we did previously, which again is just two terms being multiplied by two terms. So I'm going to take the 4 and multiply it by 4, so I get 16. I'm going to take that 4 again and make sure it gets multiplied by that negative 3x, which is going to be a negative 12x. Then I'm going to come back to negative 3x, and I'm going to also make sure it gets multiplied by both terms. So negative 3x times a positive 4 is negative 12x again, and negative 3x times negative 3x is a positive 9x squared. So just like the previous problem, you want to make sure that you combine like terms, but you also want to make sure that your answer is in descending order, which means from the largest to the smallest. And technically this term right here is our largest term because it has the highest exponent. Okay, so that would actually get written first. Our constant is 16, which always gets written last. Okay, so that is called a constant. It gets written last. It's just a plain old number. This part, which is our like terms, actually ends up being negative 24x. And I'm going to plus the 16 because 16 is positive. The 24x goes in the middle because it is the second highest. You have x squared, which is the highest, regular x, which is the next highest, and your constant, which is last. Here it gives you a definition, and it tells you A is the coefficient of x squared, B is the coefficient of x, and C is the constant. So we're just going to fill in the blanks accordingly. A is going to be 9, B is going to be negative 24, and C is going to be 16. Okay, so again, what was different here was this got squared, which means you write it twice. Same thing here. I have a set of parentheses being squared. That means that I write whatever is inside that parentheses however many times my exponent tells me to. And this is twice. Again, once you do that, it is a FOIL problem. Let me just change my color. 2x times 2x gives me 4x squared. 2x times 1 is plus 2x. 1 times 2x is plus 2x. And 1 times 1 is plus 1. When I see my like terms, 2x and 2x, I get 4x squared plus 4x plus 1. Now in this problem, they actually want you to type the answer in, so I'm going to show you how to do that. You're going to do 4x. You're going to hit the up arrow, which is above the number 6 key. You have to hit Shift 6 to get the up arrow 2. And that is how we write an exponent. Plus just 4x and then plus just 1. It's always a good idea to preview your answer to make sure it looks the way you want it to look. Then I'm going to go ahead and submit. Okay. I'm just going to keep going here. Same thing, okay? Big thing is just watch out for your signs. Make sure you're erasing everything and make sure you look for anything that can simplify. V times 2v is 2v squared. V times 1 is just a positive 1v. Negative 3 times 2v is just a negative 6v. And negative 3 times 1 is just a negative 3. Again, these are my like terms, so I get 2v squared minus 5v minus 3. Again, I'm subtracting this because these signs are different. 1 is positive, 6 is negative. They have different signs, so you find the difference, which means to subtract. Whenever you subtract, you also take the sign of the highest number. Since 6 is bigger, we took the sign of the bigger number. Okay, we're going to erase that. Now let's look at this one. It's a little bit of a longer problem, but it's the same concept we've been looking at expanded. So I have x minus 2 squared, which we know is just going to be x minus 2 times x minus 2, minus whatever I get here, x plus 1 squared. So let's work this out one thing at a time. Let's work this first part out, okay? X times x is x squared. X times negative 2 is a negative 2x. Negative 2 times x is again a negative 2x. And negative 2 times negative 2 is a plus 4. When I combine like terms, I get x squared minus 4x plus 4. But we haven't used this yet, so I'm just going to bring that down. So what I want you guys to realize is that this negative sign is kissing this parentheses, which means this negative sign is going to get applied to everything in here. But I need to work out this exponent first. So I'm going to get the x plus 1 times the x plus 1, right? This stuff is just going to wait for me to finish. X times x is x squared. X times 1 is 1x. 1 times x is also 1x. And 1 times 1 is 1. When I combine like terms, I get x squared plus 2x plus 1. So here it is. I got x squared minus 4x plus 4, which is this part, minus the answer that I got here, which is, and yes, I kept it in parentheses because I wanted you guys to see how that negative changed everything. So now what happens is that negative is like distributing a negative 1. So I get x squared minus 4x plus 4 minus x squared minus 2x and minus 1. Again, once you do all that, it's all about those like terms. My x squareds actually cancel because I have one positive and one negative, so they actually disappear. I have negative 4x and negative 2x, which gives me a negative 6x. And then I have a positive 4 and a negative 1, which gives me a positive 3. So I'm going to go ahead and try to type that in to see how my answer likes me. We got negative 6x plus 3. I'm going to preview it, which is always good, and then submit. Very good. So watch out for that negative sign that kisses the parentheses like it did here. That negative sign has to get applied to whatever happens out of here. Okay? Similar, but they try to make it look a little different by making it d squared times d squared. You're still foiling. You're still making sure everything gets multiplied. The difference is that d squared times d squared is d to the 4th power because d squared is d times d. This d squared is d times d again, and technically I have 4. So you're adding those together. So d squared times d squared is d to the 4th. D squared times 1 is just regular d squared. Negative 1 times d squared is minus d squared, and negative 1 times 1 is just a minus 1. Again, just like the other problem, these terms cancel out because they are opposites, and I'm left with d to the 4th power minus 1 as my final answer. Same thing, it's just multiple choice version, and this is also the same thing, but I am going to help you work it out because the numbers are a little larger. It really shouldn't make a difference, but I know sometimes to you guys it does. So I'm going to do 6w cubed times negative 6w cubed gives me a negative 36, or that's w to the 5th, so it's going to be w to the 8th because I'm going to add the 3 and the 5 together. 6w cubed times 1 is just 6w cubed. 1 times negative 6w to the 5th minus 6w to the 5th. And then 1 times 1 is just regular old 1. So this problem actually doesn't have anything to combine. It is already in descending order, so this would be my final answer just as is. I am going to go back to a problem 7b number 6 because somebody texted me about it and I want to make sure I get it in this video as well. So I'm going to do 7b number 6. Okay. In this problem, it is an evaluate problem, which is again a fancy way to say plug it in. Okay, so I have 4b to the 2nd power p. B is 3 and b is negative 3 and p is negative 2. So make sure you use parentheses when you plug the numbers in, because if you don't, it will start to look really crazy. So it's 4 times b squared times b. So 4 times negative 3 squared times negative 2. We're actually going to do the negative 3 squared first, and we get a positive 9 because negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9. I'm going to bring down the 4 that I didn't use yet, bring down the negative 2 that I didn't use yet. And now, since this is all multiplication, it honestly doesn't really matter what order I do it in because multiplication you can do in any order. So here I'm going to get 4 times, I'm going to actually do 4 times negative 2 is negative 8 times my 9 is a negative 72. Okay, I'm just going to go back because I do believe there were a few other problems that someone texted me about, so I just want to make sure I get those. There was actually some from section G here, so I'm going to go back to section 6G because there were some questions there. 6G. Oh, let me clear this. 6. Now, I am going into it a different way than you guys. Please don't try to go in the way that I'm going. You guys go through Blackboard just like you've been doing. 6G, number 6, and number 7. Okay, so let me read this. It says, Joy recently hired a contractor to do some work. On the final bill, Joy was charged a total of $871. Parts were listed for $200, and the rest was for labor. They didn't tell us what that was. That's why you see me labeling it as a variable. If the hourly rate was $61 an hour, how many hours of labor was needed to complete the job? First, write the equation we can use to answer the question. So what I would say that if the total I spent was $871, and that total was made up of $200 in parts plus $61 for every hour that he worked. Now again, they didn't tell us how many hours he worked. That's why we used a variable. But I know however many hours he worked, we're going to end up multiplying it by $61 because it costs $61 an hour. So now that this technically is the equation, so I would actually write 61x plus 200 equals 871. That is the equation. And then to figure out how many hours he actually did work, you have to actually solve the equation, which means get this variable by itself. And my battery is going to die. I can't believe it. I gotta go to my pointer. I'm going to do the best I can, and if I have to put up 2 videos, I just will. Or maybe I can go find my charger. To solve this equation, we got to get this variable all by itself, which is minus 200, minus 200. We use the opposite operation to move this 200 to the other side. So since it's positive, in order to move it to the other side, we do minus. So I'm left with 61x equals 671. And last but not least, to get x by itself, we're going to do the opposite operation here, which is division. Now, technically, 61 is being multiplied by x. So if you want to break up the 61 and the x, or separate the number from the letter, we have to do the opposite, which is division. And whatever you do on one side, you always have to do on the other. And your final answer will just be x equals 11. So that would be right here. How many hours of labor? It must have been 11 hours. Let's see here. Okay, let's clear this. Let me go back out to another one. I think you guys were also asking for number 7. Okay. A rectangular field, so I'm just going to draw a picture as soon as I know it's a shape. A rectangular field is 6 times as long as it is wide. Well, if this is the width and my length is 6 times as long as it is wide, I can assume this expression here. Okay, so technically, let's talk about that again. If this is a rectangle and it's 6 times as long as it is wide, they didn't tell us anything about the width, so we're just going to go ahead and label the width as W. If my length is 6 times that, we literally write 6 times W. Now, since it's a rectangle, I can assume that if this side is W, this side is also W. If this side is 6W, this side is also 6W. Okay. Now it goes on to tell us that the perimeter is 840 feet. So that means if I add all 4 of these sides together, it should equal 840. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to add all these together. I got 6W plus W plus another 6W plus another W equals a total of 840. Now this is all like terms. I got 6 and 6 is 12, 13, 14. 14W equals 840. To get W by itself, again, you're going to divide because the opposite of multiplication, 14 is being multiplied by W. The opposite of that is division. Whatever you do on one side, you have to do on the other. So I'm going to get 840 divided by 14. It's going to give me 60. So my W equals 60. Once I know what my W is, I can go back and find out what my length is. I can find out my length by taking 6W and plugging in what I found W to be. 6 times 60. So that means that my length must be 360. So this is going to be just 60. My length is 360. And my equation is 14W equals 840. Okay? Alright, so here, I know I said a lot, so I want you to just try to break it down as much as possible. First of all, as soon as they mention a shape, I drew the shape. Then it tried to describe the shape to me. It described the shape by talking about the length, but it was referencing the width. Since they didn't tell me anything about the width, we go ahead and label that with a variable, which in this case happened to be W. Once I labeled the variable that they didn't tell me anything about, I used that to write about the description. They described it as 6 times the width. They also told us that the total around was 840, and that is what allowed us to set up the equation. Because if I know that adding all 4 sides should give me this, once I have expressions for each side, I can actually follow through with that. And then it's all about solving. Okay, let me see what else. I think someone asked me about. Let's see here. 6H. So what am I, 6G? Okay, so let me go to 6H. I'm sorry I'm skipping around a little. I'm just, since that video didn't get recorded, I'm kind of just trying to wing it. Here, we're gonna do 6 and 7. That's what somebody asked for. Okay. This one says a Toyota Camry is traveling. So we got a Camry. The Toyota Camry is traveling 3 times as fast as the Dodge truck. So already I see we have a Toyota and we have a Dodge. Okay, those are the 2 things that we're talking about. In the previous problem, we had a rectangle, we had length, and we had width. Those were the 2 things we were talking about. Here we have a Toyota and a Dodge. The Toyota is traveling 3 times as fast as the Dodge. So if I were to ask you which one did they tell me nothing about, it would be this one. It didn't tell me anything. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a variable, because that's exactly what you want to do. You want to give the variable to the one that you know nothing about. Now, it did describe the Toyota to me by saying it was 3 times the Dodge. Well, then that means the Toyota is 3 times the Dodge. If their combined speed was 148 miles an hour, well, that means if I add the Toyota and the Dodge, it should equal 148 miles. A simplified version of this is 4D equals 148. Now that would actually be the equation. Okay? But now it goes on to ask you questions about it, because once we have the equation, we can actually start answering some questions. So it says, after solving the equation, what was the speed of the Camry? Well, the Camry is 3D. That means I have to find out what D is. The only way to find out D is to separate the 4 away from the D by doing division, because division breaks up the multiplication. Whatever you do on one side, you do to the other, and my D is going to be 37. So my Toyota must have been going 37 miles per hour. Then that means that my Dodge, no, I'm lying. My Dodge was going 37 miles an hour. My Toyota was going 3 times as fast as that. So that means my Toyota was going 111 miles per hour. Way too fast, obviously. Okay? So again, you label the variable, the item that you know nothing about, and then you use that variable to describe the other item. Usually it's a total at this level, so total obviously indicates adding, and then you have to set it equal to whatever total they gave you. Okay. I think they also wanted me to do number 7. Okay. During a recent basketball game, the Miami Heat scored 24 fewer points to Orlando Magic. Here we go again. We got Heat and we got Magic. Those are the 2 things they're talking about. Out of the Heat and the Magic, which one did they tell me nothing about? The Miami Heat scored 24. Okay, so they told me something about the Heat, but they didn't tell me anything about Magic. So I'm going to make Magic M. If the Miami Heat scored 24 fewer points than they did, that means that the Heat scored whatever Magic did minus 24. Together, both teams scored 200. So when I add this together, I should get 200. So I got M minus 24 plus N equals 200. Again, once the equation is set up, you simplify the equation before you start solving. by combining like terms, which is 2m minus 24. This would be my equation, 2m minus 24 equals 200. And then I have to solve it. So I'm going to solve it by moving 24 to the other side by doing the opposite operation, which in this case was a plus 24. And then I'm going to separate the 2 from the m by dividing, because again 2 is being multiplied by m. So the opposite of multiplication is division. That means my m equals 112 points. M is magic, so I'm going to find magic. Magic is here. Magic was 112. What was Miami Heat? Miami Heat did 24 fewer, so they did 112 minus 24, which is 88 points. And obviously 88 and 112 should equal a grand total of 200. Okay, so now let's go back to some parts. Oh, I think that was 5B. I think I was supposed to be doing 6. Let me just go check. 6. No, I was in the right place. I did, right? 6H. I'm just double checking, guys. I don't know. I think it just might be labeled incorrectly. Okay. Alright, that's cool. Let's go back to 7. That's where we were. Alright, I did 7D. Let's do a couple more from 7E. This is actually simpler than what we did before. What we were doing before was 2 terms multiplied by 2 terms. Here it's 1 term, a monomial. Monomial, that's an N. Okay. Which means it's 1 term. 1 term multiplied by 1 term. So essentially what you're doing is you're taking the coefficients, which is 7 and 8. You get 56. And then the variables, x and x cubed, which is really x to the 4th. Don't overcomplicate it, okay? Let's skip around a little here. I like this one. This one, again, I think is still a little bit simpler before, because before we were multiplying 2 by 2. Here it's just 1 term being multiplied 3 times. So 4x squared times 3x squared gives me a 12x to the 4th. 4x squared times negative 4x. First of all, a positive times a negative is a negative. 4 times 4 is 16. X squared and x is x cubed. And then 4x squared times 2. 4 and 2 give me 8. And then the x squared is unbothered. This cannot be simplified. There are no like terms. And it is also already written in order. So I'm good to go. This answer is good to go just as is. Same thing. We did that in the previous section. We also did that in the previous section. Okay, this just seems like a lot of extra practice. Let me go ahead and do this one because this is a unique one in that it cancels and you're only left with 2 terms in the final answer. So it is still the same thing though. It's just unique in that way. 5x times 5x is 25x squared. 5x times negative 9 is a negative 45x. 9 times 5x is a positive 45x. And 9 times negative 9 is a negative 81. As you can see here, these middle terms are opposites of each other, so they cancel out, and you're just left with 25x squared minus 81. This is called the difference between the difference of perfect squares, and you'll actually learn more about that in the next class. How to factor it, how to break it up, how to get back to the original. But this is as far as we need to go here today. Same thing, you're just distributing that 6x squared, distribute the 5x cubed, and you're distributing the 4x squared. Just watch out for the exponents that are higher than 2. You're going to make sure you add those together. So like this one will be 20x to the 4th power plus 16x cubed. Okay, so that give me 20 x to the 4th, and that give me 16x cubed. We added those exponents together to get those numbers. Okay, let's look at some from 8. I want to make sure I get some of those in there for you guys. Okay, I believe in whoever attended the session on ratios, I believe we found one in here that I told you guys not to do, and hopefully I'll come across it again. Ratios is nothing more than comparing two things. I always use football as an example. So for instance, if whoever your favorite team is, you always know their record. Oh, my team is 12-2. That means they had 12 wins, 2 losses. You're comparing their wins to losses. You can write ratios a couple different ways. You can write it like with the words. You can write it as a fraction. You can also write it with colons. We're going to primarily focus on the fraction. Enter the ratio as a fraction in the lowest terms. That's something else. Ratios always technically should be simplified. Okay. So here I'm comparing 12 minutes to 45 minutes. Now technically, let's see, I think 12 is divisible by 3, and I believe 45 is also divisible by 3. So I get 4/15 as the final. I'm going to try and type that in to see if it likes me. I usually use parentheses. So, yep, there we go. All right, let's clear it. Let's pick another one. Same thing. So I'd write 32/20, and then I would go ahead and simplify that. 32/20. Okay. We go to it. I'm looking for one that has something a little bit different. Same thing here. Don't be shy. Okay. It's just a decimal. $1.50 over $1.20. I would first cancel out those zeros. And I'm gonna actually see how it wants me to type this in, because I wouldn't actually leave it like this. I would actually do 1.5 divided by 1.2, and I'd get 1.25. I just want to see if it actually takes that answer. Nope, it wants me to leave it as a fraction. So let's see. This time they gave us 150 over 180, cross those out, 1.5 and 1.8. Actually could divide those both by 3. I don't know if it wants me to do that though. 0.6. I'm going to make that a 5. 6. Let's see if it likes that. Okay. I don't know if it will, but we're going to find out. And these are some of the ones I was like, this is kind of silly. I don't know why they're making you do it this way. Okay. So all I did was convert these to whole numbers. I moved the decimal. That was it, to make it 5/6. Or you could have divided this by 0.3. If you divided it by 3, this is how I got 0.5 and 0.6. And you just don't write decimals in fractions like that. That's why I converted them to whole numbers. But again, see, that you guys should be able to do it now that I did the video, but this is just kind of silly. You would never really need to do it like that. You would never need to do that. All right, so what you see here is what we call rates, and rates are still ratios. It's just rates mean there's 2 different units involved. With the ratios, we were pretty much comparing the same exact thing. So here I got 10 feet in 15 seconds, and it wants me to write it in lowest terms. So if I divided these both by 5, I would get 2 feet in 3 seconds. So I'm going to type that in, and again, I just want to make sure it's accepting correct answers. And again, I do use parentheses for my fractions. Very good. Okay. You're not going to see a whole bunch of these. Same thing. This is a rate because it's miles and gallons. I got 144 miles per 6 gallons. Simplify those. At the very least, they're even. So I would get 72 and 3. I was actually going to 72 pretty evenly. So 72 divided by 3 gives me 24. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and type 24 in so you can see. It'll be 24 over 1 technically, but I could just write 24 and it should accept it. There we go. Just again, skipping around. I didn't find that one that I told you guys not to worry about yet. Watch out for the order that they give it to you. Here it's puppets per day. So the puppets should actually be in the numerator and the day should actually be in the denominator. The puppets should be in the numerator and the days. Don't just write it in the order they give it to you. If you can see, they have the units puppet per day. It didn't have days per puppet. It had puppets per day. So I'm going to get 9 here. Let me go ahead and type that in and hit submit. There we go. Okay. Okay, here again, just watch the order. It has states per day. So I'm going to put states first and then days second. So I go 2 states per day. Watch the order. That's what they're trying to trick you on right there. Okay. Let me see if I want to do any more, or if I'll just cover the rest on Wednesday. Proportions. Do some proportions. Proportions are very similar to ratios because technically what a proportion is 2 ratios set equal to each other. So this is technically a ratio. This is technically a ratio. As soon as you set them equal to each other, well, now it's a proportion. Okay? Proportion means, for instance, let's say that your real house is, let's say, 9 feet tall, and let's just say it's 20 feet wide. But let's say your daughter wants to build a dollhouse, the same exact version, just smaller. So what you would do is you would make a house in proportion to yours. It's not the same size, but proportionally it is. So for instance, if this is 9 feet tall, maybe you make this 9 centimeters, right? And 20 centimeters. This would be in proportion with each other. Not the same size, but a very similar size. So determine if this proportion is true. One of the ways that you can determine whether proportions are true is to simply just cross multiply. So 3 times 14 and 7 times 7. If those two things are equal, then my proportion is true. 3 times 14 is 42, and 7 times 7 is 49. So no, my proportion is not true. So in order to solve proportions, check if they're true, you cross multiply. Okay? See what else they have here. Same thing, you're going to cross multiply. Okay. Here Joe worked. Joe did 4 cartons in 3 hours. Now the reason I'm writing cartons first in hours is I can see in the answers it put cartons per hour. Cartons per hour. So I want to make sure I'm writing my ratios and my proportions as cartons per hour. So Joe did this. 4 cartons in 3 hours. Bob did 2 hours of work and only did 3 cartons. Who packed the most cartons per hour? So what I would do here is I would actually divide these. I would say 4 divided by 3. Okay, hold on. 4 divided by 3. 4 divided by 3 just gives me, so Joe did 1.33 cartons per hour. And this guy Bob did 3 divided by 2, which technically is 1.5 cartons per hour. So technically Bob packed the most cartons, because if they kept going for 2 hours, 3 hours, you would see that Bob outdoes Joe in a shorter amount of time. Same exact thing, same exact thing. So I'm just going to go back to this one where it's asking, did they work at the same rate? This is asking a different question, right? This isn't asking who did more. It wants to know if they're equal. So in other words, it wants to know if the proportion is true. If Joe did 25 cartons in 5 hours and Bob did 20 cartons in 4 hours, again, if I want to know if this is true, I'm going to go ahead and cross multiply. 25 times 4 set equal to 5 times 20. These both equal 100. So yes, they were working at the same rate. So again, notice when it was asking who did more, I did something a little different. I just divided them individually. When I wanted to know if they were equal or if they were working the same, I cross multiplied them. Okay, same thing here. What you're going to want to do is set up your first ratio, which here it says I did I made 20 cookies with 1 1/4 cups of sugar. And it wants to know, to make 14 cookies, how many cups of sugar will I need? So the first ratio was 20 cookies and 1 1/4 cups sugar. The second ratio was, well, if I got 14 cookies, how many cups of sugar? Keep it the same. If I start with cookies in the numerator here, make sure you put cookies in the numerator here as well. Before I cross multiply this, I need this mixed number to be an improper fraction, so I'm going to do 20 over 1 1/4 is really 5 over 4 equals 14 times x. Now I'm going to go ahead and solve this by cross multiplying. So here 20 times x is simply just 20x equals 14, which is a whole number, times a fraction, which is 5 over 4. Don't lose what you know. You know how to multiply fractions. You just happen to be multiplying a fraction times a whole number, which is 5 over 4 times 14 over 1. I could simplify these now, or I could just multiply straight across. 14 times 5 is 70. 1 times 4 is 4. I can simplify this a little bit, so I get 20x equals 17.5. To get x by itself, I'm going to divide by 20. And I get x equals 0.875. Now, it says enter your answer as a fraction or a whole number, so I can't leave it like this. So 0.875 is really tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 875 over 1,000. Now, I probably could avoid some of this if I would have simplified back here. Okay? But however, whatever is easier for you. So I'm going to divide 875 by 5, and I'm going to get 175. I'm going to divide 1,000 by 5. I'm going to get 200. As you can see, we can keep going. So let's see, 175 divided by 25 equals 7, and 200 divided by 25 equals 8. So I'm actually going to type in 7 over 8. And I am going to use parentheses. Hopefully it's okay with that. And you should always preview. It did. Okay. Alright, let's see. Again, this is just solving a proportion, which means cross multiply. I'm going to get 15 times x, which is 15x. 10 times 18, which is 180. In order to find out what x is, I need to separate the 15 from the x, which means I'm going to divide. And 180 divided by 15 is just 12. These are the same. Okay, so that's going to be it for today, guys. I am going to schedule a session for Wednesday that will continue to cover Learner Module 8 and anything else you guys need help with. Don't forget, make sure that you guys go through the trouble of starting to look at your review for final exams now. because your final exam is due March 4th. That's the last day that you can take your final in any Valencia testing center, so make sure you bring your Valencia ID. And I'm just trying to get back to that final exam part. So I will, right here, you need to go over there. Okay. So as you can see in the final exam prep learning module, there's a link for the review and the final. Start taking the review now. It's very, very, very similar to the real thing. It's 40 questions. You guys, at first glance, you should recognize that the final looks a lot easier than the homework that you guys have been doing, and that's because it is. The homework is harder than the final exam that you guys will take. That means we've been practicing the harder stuff, so the final should be easy. So take your time, go through these 40 questions, start to figure out what you need to work on. Of course, I'm going to do a session just about the final exam, but the next one will be about learning module 8. Okay? Thank you guys for watching my videos, and I'll see you soon.